Good morning, those of you guys who are with me. Good morning, good morning. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes for some more people to join us. So hopefully we'll have a good class time today. Hopefully you guys are all well. I see Andrew, Olivia, Micah is here. Static noise. Okay. Let me just double check, make sure all my kids are off of technology. Hopefully our audio is going to get a little bit better. I will be back.
You would just be stuck because I make sure to turn my phone off so I'm on data right now.
Okay. Say hi to the class because you're on video. All right. I only have 3 people with me right now, so hopefully some more will still get connected in. All right, I'm not sure if you guys went ahead and printed off some of the things that we're going to go through. Also, if we have some extra time today, we'll actually do some of the study guide together. So hopefully that will be beneficial for you guys coming into next week. Otherwise, you have a fairly large assignment to do on Monday. So we'll see how things go. I do feel like our class together is very one-sided. So I feel like sometimes I get through things a little quickly. I will be watching the comments through YouTube more than the comments on Classroom because I can't monitor both things and kind of continue. So, Lydia, I see that you made a comment on Classroom. I'll check that quickly, but I probably will not get back to Classroom to check comments there. So unfortunately, I just can't do both those things. So let me go ahead and check that quickly before we get started. All right. I'm not even getting that Classroom thing, so I just got to know. Okay. We will spend some time going through vocabulary and doing that right now with only, I have 7 now. So go ahead, get out your vocabulary. Let's spend some time doing that. We'll kind of do what we've done in the past, which is I will give you guys a vocabulary word, and then you guys can pop in and we'll see who gets the first input. I realize that it's not completely fair. Some of you guys have better internet than others. Some of you guys are watching this after class time, but hopefully at least you're getting into some vocabulary. So again, you guys have completed all of module 14 and read through all of it. There are more vocabulary words on this particular chapter than some, but, and hopefully you guys are all enjoying the beautiful snow. As much as we might not like snow during April, it is still beautiful. So hopefully we will appreciate that. All right, so first vocabulary thing that I'll give you guys. I'm looking for correct spelling as well. So give me the best you can give me. The process of cutting away the inner and outer bark all the way around a tree trunk. Ooh, Micah's got it. Liver is not the correct answer. Girdling is. So Micah got that one. Here's the next one. Cells that have not specialized in any particular function. Welcome to Olivia, and looks like Emma's on. And oh, we've got it. Amanda's got the first correct answer, which is undifferentiated cells. So awesome. Going another vocabulary word. Again, Lydia, if you are commenting on Classroom, I am not monitoring that. My phone is buzzing, but I'm not monitoring that. So if you kind of want to, if there's a possibility, you can watch through YouTube. That might be a little bit better. And that's where the rest of your fellow classmates are making comments. So, all right, next one. Plants that live for only 1 year. And yes, Micah, give yourself a couple of minutes to see who else can hop in there. So again, plants that only live for 1 year. Annual, I've got a first correct answer that I see, and that's from Andrew. So good job hopping on there. Biennial is not correct, but annual is. Seeing correct answers from others as well popping in there. But the first person I saw was Andrew. Another question. Or I should say vocabulary word. The arrangement of leaves on the stem of a plant. I'll repeat, the arrangement of leaves on the stem of a plant. Leaf mosaic. I see Olivia with the first correct answer that I'm seeing popping up on my thing. So good job to Olivia. We'll do a couple more. A seed leaf which develops as part of the seed. It provides nutrients to the developing seedling and eventually becomes the first leaf of the plant. And Micah, you can hop in there again. All right, Mike has got the first correct answer coming in that I see, which is cotyledon. And last one that we'll do before we'll actually kind of start talking about some other things. Non-living vascular tissue that carries water and dissolved minerals from the roots of its plants to its leaves. Again, non-living vascular tissue that carries water and dissolved minerals from the roots of the plant to its leaves. All right, xylem. All right, we have Lydia popping on there, so good job. Andrew looks like came in first, followed by Lydia. So awesome. Glad to have you, Lydia, on with us here with the comments on live chat for our YouTube. All right. Are there any questions that you guys have as we're getting started to kind of discuss? One of the reasons I'm doing this as a live YouTube is so that you guys have the opportunity to connect in with me, and that way I can respond directly to your questions. Hopefully we will not have the internet glitches like we did last week. So hopefully. So any questions? Otherwise, we will start doing the one-sided chatting about the things of Module 14. Guys, look, I have all sorts of demonstration things today to kind of go through. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about the things of the chapter. I'm going to kind of go through the outline that I sent you guys about the details of the plant kingdom, but I'm going to kind of digress and talk about some of the things that we have here, give you some examples. Hopefully you guys have your textbooks close, because I will refer to some different diagrams and stuff in your textbook to discuss to help to prepare you for the test that you guys have on next Tuesday. All right, so plant anatomy, which is basically the structure of the plant itself. We deal with the roots, the stems, the leaves, as well as the internal anatomy, dealing with the cells, etc., for the plant. So there is woody or herbaceous plants. Obviously, the woody are going to be the things that grow from year to year. They're typically are perennials, they are ongoing, versus our herbaceous. That's a term that more refers to the annuals that die off. It's like the regular plants that typically with a season like we have here will die off at the end of the year. But a herbaceous plant typically doesn't have the woody stem that you guys are going to see on the different trees and stuff that you have. All right, so the three terms, there was perennial, which refers to growing year after year. There is annual meaning anna meaning one, which is grows for only 1 year. And there's die means two, which means the plants that live for 2 years. So you guys can think of some examples, I'm sure, of a lot of annuals, annual flowers, annual things that grow in your garden, perennials. The biennials are a little bit different, but there are plants that have a life cycle where they will flower every other year, but they live for 2 years, and then they kind of can reseed themselves as well. All right, so roots, stems, and leaves are the vegetative parts, but the reproductive parts are the flowers, fruits, and the seeds. A lot of times when people refer to fruits and vegetables, they sometimes refer to things incorrectly. So by botany or botany related things, anything that has to do with the reproductive or seeds inside is considered a fruit. So for example, thinking about your garden vegetables, some of them are vegetables and some of them are indeed fruit. Think about a tomato. A tomato has a seed on the inside, so it's considered a fruit. A cucumber has a seed inside, so it's considered a fruit. Referring back to the different anatomical things, so if the vegetative is anything that comes from the roots, stems, and leaves. So think about a carrot. A carrot would be considered a vegetable because it has to do with the fact that you eat the carrot. It's actually the taproot of the carrot itself. There are 4 different types of vascular tissue, or I should say 4 different types of tissue, and those tissues are important for the different functions of the plant. Xylem and phloem are part of the vascular tissue versus meristematic. That's one of the definitions, the term that you guys had to remember, and that has to do with undifferentiated cells, where basically they could become whatever they need to be. Sometimes in science, they'll talk to those things as the same thing as a stem cell, or basically undifferentiated cell that can become whatever you want it to be. So xylem and phloem. The way that I remember that xylem and phloem and the differences between the two, xylem, it is non-living, but it moves water. The W of the water is closer to the X in the alphabet, but phloem is living and it actually carries the food. So phloem carries food or sugar, and the xylem just carries the water. And xylem is non-living, phloem is actually living parts. So we need to then kind of move on into our vegetative part, more talking about the leaves themselves. If you guys would look in your textbook, have your textbook open for me. and refer to page 431, 432, 433, 434. We're going to actually talk about those different things and going through them. So please have those close by. I see a comment that I sound like a robot. Sorry. So looking at the parts of the leaf on page 431. So we have, I'm going to just kind of take some leaf stuff that I have. So the blade itself is going to be the structure of the leaf itself. So I'm going to donate one of my plants here. So we'll kind of look here. So this part right here, okay, is the blade. This tip right here is the apex, and the petiole is basically like this stem that attaches to the main stem of the plant. You can actually look at the venation on it and kind of see, you can look at from the back side and see how the veins going on there. Looking at comments. Snowman Maggie. All right. So anyway, looking at this, so again, apex, blade, and the petiole. Flipping on then to the next page, page 432. The way that you can tell if it's a leaflet or a leaf is looking for a bud that's at the base where it's attached. Now, I actually brought this in. This is just because of the snow and the different things. The trees haven't really leafed out at all, so I just kind of brought in. We can actually learn a lot from even a branch, a dead stick, it looks like, from there. If you look, there are buds right here. Those buds signify the base of either a leaf, where it would have one leaf, or a leaflet with a different thing. So if you look at the bud, I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm going to bring this a little closer. There's actually a bud. And if it just attaches like a leaf, this obviously didn't come from this, but just like this, okay, this would be a single leaf. Versus if it had that and had the branching off, it would actually be a leaflet. So you can actually look for a compound leaf versus a simple leaf by looking for the bud that's at the base where it attaches. It also will leave a leaf scar where the leaf has left from there. All right, so you guys, snowman talk. How about we wait that for a little bit? Pay attention just a bit as you guys are going through things. So leaf mosaics, are they opposite, okay, where they're right across from each other? Are they alternate, where it's like one up, one down? Or are they whorled? Whorled is typically what you will see in the tropics versus alternate is every other. And opposite is what you see on maple trees. Maple trees are probably the most obvious here in our northern Illinois climate that have the opposite leaf arrangement. I will tell you guys this, for your upcoming test on Tuesday, there are a lot of points that deal with the leaf shapes, the leaf mosaics, as well as the margins and the venations. There's a lot of points in there, so it's one of those things that's why we're spending some extra time going through them. All right, looking at page 433 and the common leaf shapes in creation. Sometimes we can look at those and kind of figure out what they are by their overall shapes or referring things. So the linear ones, obviously it looks more like a line. The elliptical has a little bit longer and wider than the linear, but it's not as wide as the oval. So it is like, if you look at elliptical and oval, it could be that a personal opinion of whether it's oval or it's elliptical, because there's not really any distinguishing margin, or excuse me, proportions of it's twice as wide as it is long. So they're close, but oval shape is very similar to elliptical. A deltoid is actually a triangular shape. So like your deltoid muscle on your shoulder it has a triangular shape. Delta, like change in, it is triangular. So deltoid is like that triangular leaf shape. A chordate, chord actually is like a heart shape. So if you look at the chordate leaf, it is heart shaped. It actually comes down in the margin or round, and chord, like our heart, is heart shaped. Orbicular has to do with an orb. Orbicular meaning round. So orbicular is more of a round shape. Lobed and cleft. The difference between those is how deeply indented it is. So with a cleft, it goes down deep like it would on a maple, or here is like a cleft of an oak tree down deep, versus more of a lobed looks a little bit more like this. Unfortunately, I'm kind of having to find some dead leaves from last year, but notice how this is more curved in shape for the leaf shape versus this is definitely more pointed. So this would be more of a cleft shape versus a lobe shaped. Then we have needle-like and scale-like. So I have here some different evergreens, which are not deciduous, they are evergreens. So we're going to kind of talk about these before we go on to our next shape. So this is an arborvitae. Now an arborvitae is actually very flat and it's actually scale-like. If you guys can see that, definitely more scale-like. Okay, but that's an arborvitae. Does anybody know how you tell the difference between like a spruce, a fir, and a pine tree? Those are three evergreen trees. Arborvitae too. Those are three evergreen trees, but I'm going to kind of teach you guys the difference and how to tell the difference between a spruce, a fir, an arborvitae, and a pine. Does anybody know? I'm going to wait for some things. Does anybody know the difference and how to tell the difference? Reading your comments now, guys. All right, so since nobody is popping in with how to tell the difference, I'm going to kind of go through. This is a pine. One of the ways that you can tell any kind of a pine is the fact that its needles come in bundles. So when I pluck this off, this is a bundle and it's two together. So all of our pines come in bundles, whether it's a white pine or any other variety of pine, they always come in bundles. The length and how many needles come together, that'll depend upon the species, but the bundled things themselves are always going to be pines. This next one here, this is a spruce. Well, how do you know the difference between a spruce and like a fir? And I have just kind of a dead fir. I don't have any fir in my yard, but we did have a fir tree, so I was able to sacrifice and find some little bit of some dead fir. But a spruce, it starts with the letter S, but it is sharp. Okay, so as I'm poking it and putting my finger against the end of it, it is sharp. Also, if I take a needle off and rotate it between my fingers, kind of like twirl it, it actually has ridges. And those ridges, it is square. So it's sharp and it's square. So that is a spruce. It's sharp and it's square. Lydia, also the types of cones they produce. That is true. That's another way to do it. But if you're just looking at the needles or a way to determine, versus my fir that I have. Now this fir is obviously kind of dead. That's okay, because we'll still be able to see as I take a needle off, it is flat and it is friendly. So remember that our spruces are kind of sharp. If you fall into a spruce tree, you kind of know it. Versus if you fall into a fir tree, it is friendly. It is not as sharp. And it's also a flat needle. So if you like kind of twirl it in your hand, you'll realize that it is indeed, it's got two distinctive flat sides to it. Okay. All right, looking at our comments. Okay, and in arborvitae, again, it is very distinctively scale-like. So that's how you can tell an arborvitae going there. So referring back to page 433 again, those common leaf shapes, you guys do need to know those, as well as the leaf mosaics going on, compound, simple leaves. Flip over to page 434, and let's kind of talk about the margins of leaves. So sometimes it's a little bit of a personal opinion again. So you can't necessarily distinguish between dentate and serrate as easily, but if it is undulated, you try to call it dentate, not so close. All right, so entire meaning it actually has a smooth margin. So if you kind of come back here to my houseplant, it actually has a very smooth margin. Versus serrate is like a steak knife has a serrated edge, which is like the same size ridges as you go along. A dentate, dent means tooth. So if you go to the dentist or the orthodontist, all those things mean tooth. So the dentate has got a big one and then a smaller one, bigger one and a smaller one. Those are what makes it a dentate versus a serrate. Serrate, again, is going to be all even-sized little ridges. The crenate is actually just a little bit more of smooth ridges. Undulate, again, they're spread out. So are you guys, any of you, I know some of you guys are swimmers, but the swimmers, they are undulating. So it's the up and down movement. The up and down movement when you're going through the water with doing like a breaststroke or doing a, not a breaststroke, there's a breaststroke and a fly. Those are undulating terms, okay? So that undulate is like the big movements versus crenate is, again, it is closer together. Then the next thing that we need to discuss is venations. So we have parallel, pinnate, and palmate. So parallel venations, if you guys can look here, parallel venations, looking at the back side, they all run the same direction. You can actually tell that they run the same direction. Even if it has a main rib, they will all run the same direction, okay? Versus a palmate, if you look at this particular, I'm going to sacrifice one of my leaves here, okay? So this is a palmate, okay? It actually has more than one kind of main rib, so it does have a distinctive, but it also kind of comes together like your palm, okay, where it comes down to the same point and kind of radiates out from one point. That is palmate. Versus pinnate is going to have one main rib and it branches off from that point. Versus the palmate is kind of where it comes together at the bottom and then bases off from there. So again, looking at the different, there's parallel, pinnate, and palmate. Okay, palm, thinking of your palm kind of radiating down to one particular point. All right, any questions? All right, looks like people are buffering a bit. One of the things that we will do, I think next week I'm going to try with you guys, is we're going to try to connect not through live stream, but we're going to either do it through Google Hangouts or through Zoom. Because next week I want to see if you guys can gather up from some flowers from your homes or from different areas, from the woods, etc., that might be close by. Not just go nab them from your neighbors, but go see what you can have. That way we can kind of all share together. Excuse me, next week we do have a flower lab. So we're going to do something different next week. So just check your email and we'll set up some things differently for next week. All right. So we've talked about then, again, some different structures of the leaf. We talked about the blade, the apex, the petiole. We talked about simple and compound leaves, looking at the, for the bud where it's attached to the stem. Alternate, again, like this. Opposite, and then whorled goes all the way around, typically in tropical plants. The leaf shapes, you guys need to know those. The margin, okay, the margin is the outside. So if you have a margin on your paper that you're typing out, like a 1-inch margin, that's how big the outside is. Well, margin just means the outside. And then venations is also one of the things that you guys need to remember: parallel, pinnate, or palmate venation. All right, so kind of moving on through our chapter, we're going to talk about the cross-section of leaves and the different things that make up leaves themselves. So I'm going to see if all right, so looking at the cross section of the leaf, I'm going to kind of pull this up so you guys can see this. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right. So looking at it, this is the cross section of a leaf. You can see the palisade layer. You can see the spongy layer, the epidermis, the xylem, the phloem. I'm actually going to kind of rearrange this so you guys can see this. I'm going to pop this down. You guys can look at it together with me. Moving things out of the way a bit. All right, so hopefully you guys can see that. Is that right side up or upside down? Hopefully we're good. All right, so looking at the different layers that you guys see, the epidermis, epi always means like it's kind of like the skin, and dermis is the skin. So that is the outside layer. You have an epidermis on the top and an epidermis on the bottom of the leaf as you're looking at the cross section of it. The palisade layer and the spongy layer, both of them have chlorophyll in it. So they're going to have the green pigments that give it color. But the palisade layer typically have a lot more chloroplasts in there. You can also see the veins as you're looking at the cross section of this leaf, the xylem and the phloem, looking at the cross section. You can see the stoma on the bottom, okay, surrounded by the guard cells. So the guard cells, what they do is they basically control the stoma. The stoma itself is just an opening. So the guard cells control how much moisture is lost or gained, how much oxygen it controls. It's kind of like the gatekeeper of the plant and what is allowed to come into and out of the cells or into and out of the plant itself through the epidermal layer. Okay. There are air spaces and more air spaces between the spongy layer than the palisade layer. The palisade layer are stacked together to maximize photosynthesis that's happening there. Also want to kind of show you guys. This isn't in color, but I'm going to still show it to you guys anyway. Okay. Looking at this, okay. All right. So again, we kind of talked about the fact that the guard cells control the water loss in plants. So here, notice the guard cells are very plump. And so when they're very plump, they actually kind of open up and allow the opening. That means there's plenty of water in the cell. Versus down here, notice how like all of those cells actually look a little bit more shrunken down. And so the guard cells have lost moisture, and in doing so, with you guys, give us a moment. Can you guys hear me? You guys hear me? Okay, so Olivia, thank you. I see that you can hear. Is everybody else kind of with me too, that you guys are still picking up? I know last week we kind of locked up and I couldn't even end my stream. So it actually kind of kept going live stream for like hours. I thought that eventually I couldn't even turn it off. So awesome. I'm hearing loud and clear. Fabulous, fabulous. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of get back to the things that we were talking about. So there were issues. So we were talking about the stoma, the epidermis, the guard cells that control. So the parenchyme tissue is what makes up the palisade and the spongy mesophils. Again, that's where chloroplasts are found, photosynthesis occurs. So there's colored pigments that you guys have kind of put this back up here. So there's colored pigments that you guys have learned about. We learned about in the process of photosynthesis how it requires chlorophyll, which is actually the green pigment. Well, many other plants have more light and temperature. Some of those other pigments actually start to show up a little bit more. But we have chlorophyll, carotenoids, anthocyanins, and those are help to give it the different colors throughout the seasonal changes that we have. Sometimes the anthocyanins can actually be controlled by the pH too. So there was a lab that you guys can do on your own if you want to, but we won't do it in class. But check it out if you have some free time, which I know you guys do. You can actually do it's like a titration lab looking at the pHs and how pH changes with color changes with the pH causes the color change if you guys want to, and that's the lab that's in your textbook. Kind of talking about roots now for a little bit. So roots, there's three functions: absorb water and nutrients, they anchor the plant, and also for food storage. Think about a carrot, obviously some food storage. Potatoes, which are tubers, obviously a lot of starch, a lot of things are stored there. Some plants, not as much food storage in the roots, but definitely they have a purpose as well. So two different types of root systems. There's fibrous and then there's the taproot. The fibrous, think about like grass or anything that sends out little runners. So those are going to be fibrous. But think about a taproot would be more like your carrot. It's actually bigger. It's actually got some side tendrils potentially, but grab something different to kind of show you. But indeed, it's a taproot. So showing you guys that. We'll talk about that in a moment too. So xylem and the phloem are also part of the root. And at this point, we're going to kind of guys, this is looking at monocots and dicots. So before we talk just about the different structures that we're going to look at under the microscope, but then because of our technology issues, we're not looking at them underneath the microscope today. But looking at it, a dicot is going to be on my left-hand side Hopefully it's your left-hand side too. So notice with the dicot and the monocot. So with the dicot, we have xylem and phloem. You guys remember that the xylem and the phloem are going to be our vascular. That's the tubes or the way that the water and the food gets circulated throughout the plant. So we have xylem and phloem, and they're arranged around the outside of the stem. Versus in a monocot, they look kind of almost like little monkey faces, but those are the vascular xylem and the phloem, but they're scattered throughout the entire stem. Now, do you guys know the difference between a monocot and a dicot? Can you tell me the difference? All right, different leaf formation. I'm seeing some things. I'm reading your comments, guys. A lot of Christmas comments. Beautiful weather it is, but I'm not sure if you guys are hearing me or not hearing me, so I'm kind of watching the comments occasionally just to see where you guys are at with things. All right, so kind of talking about monocots and dicots. So characteristics of a monocot is when it pops out of the ground even. We live in an agricultural community. And a monocot is going to be like the corn. It'll come up with one individual little stem that pops out of the ground. It's from the monocotyledon, where there's actually one epicotyl is what it's called, that comes out. So it's going to have one seed leaf, one kind of blade as it comes up. It has parallel veins. The flower parts come in multiples of 3, so it could be 3, 6, 9, etc. So the examples would be grasses, lilies, palms, all of those things are there. So if it comes, again, flower parts are in multiples of 3, one seed leaf that comes off, parallel veins, etc. Versus a dicot, di meaning 2, dicotyledons will have 2 epicotyls, so it'll have 2 first leaves that come off. They have netted veins. They have flower parts that come in multiples of 4 or 5, and the examples are most trees, wildflowers, garden flowers, etc. So when we're looking at this, okay, when we talk about the dicot, we're talking about most flowering plants, such as most garden flowers, most wildflowers, most trees are going to be dicots. Versus the monocots, that's going to be grasses. It's going to be palm leaves. It's going to be lilies. Those are all going to be monocots. So dicots and monocots. Corn, yes, corn actually is a monocot. So corn is a monocot, not a dicot. So I see that we're kind of getting some glitching again. Cotyledons. Okay, so it is important that you guys know the difference between the structure of the stems for the dicots and the monocots, in addition to the difference between the root structure for the monocots and the dicots. This is a diagram that I sent you guys. This is also similar to the diagram that you guys have in your textbook. So again, looking at this is the monocots. Notice the structure. This is the dicots. And it's got kind of like that X structure in the middle. Again, this is the root structure and development of there. So the xylem and the phloem are the inside in that X structure. Versus it's scattered around. So this is something that you guys should know going into this upcoming week. So with a monocot, with the stem, it looks kind of like the monkey face. The dicot, they form the vascular bundles around the outside for the stems, and for the roots themselves, the xylem has the X shape in the dicot. Okay. All right. Couple of things I want to show you guys. This, I don't know if you guys can see this. So this is our moss. As we start to continue into the chapter, you guys are learning about the classification of plants. So you learned about birophytes, which are non-vascular plants, as well as vascular plants with the tracheophytes. Trache meaning tubed. So the tracheophytes, which are Coniferophyta, Anthophyta, which are flowering plants, are Pterophyta, those are all ferns. But this is an example right here of birophytes. And these are our mosses. I don't know if you can see that, but this moss, it was kind of fun as I got them because they are in that stage where there is the gametophyte generation as well as the sporophyte generation. So looking at this moss is actually in the sporophyte generation. So sometimes you will see moss and it just looks like the green things at bottom, like you see here, okay? But here we actually see the gametophyte generation. I want you guys to flip in your textbooks to page 453. So if you flip in your textbooks to page 453, but they are non-vascular, so the only way that they can survive is they have to be close to a source of water. So you will find birophytes or mosses where there's a lot of moisture. They have to have immediate and close access to it, so you're not going to find it where there's not a lot of moisture. You're certainly never going to find a moss growing in the deserts. So the birophytes, again, are non-vascular. The tracheophytes, there's different things. There's the ferns. I'm going to show you guys quickly the fern life cycle. So looking at here's the fern life cycle. If you guys have seen ferns, sometimes they'll have these sori that are on the back side of the fern frond. The fern frond is basically like the fern leaf, but you'll actually see the spore cases that are on the back side of them. And those spore cases, they fall and they actually form these are microscopic heart-shaped plants, but they will actually grow and form. But most people don't realize the full life cycle of the fern itself. Most people just think of this as what a fern is, but indeed they actually have, again, this is microscopic, where they'll have the stems that'll grow in here, and eventually they will form the larger fern frond that you guys will recognize as ferns. So again, these are Pterophyta. They don't produce seeds, but they'll produce with spores with an alternate generational life cycle. The Coniferophyta, those are cone trees or are cone-bearing trees. The examples of Coniferophyta would be like our spruces, our pines, some of the things that we were discussing a little bit earlier in class. All right, so did you guys know that there are male and female cones? Most people or some people don't know that. Some people do, kind of depending. There are male and female cones. Okay. Okay, so this is looking at a life cycle or different cones. And as springtime kind of develops in the next number of weeks, you'll be able to see some of those cones. But there's actually a pollen cone that forms in the male cones. And then there is a female cone that is being fertilized by the pollen from the male cone. Then most people think of this as like the pine cone, truly. And inside each of those like flaps, that's where you're actually going to find the seeds that are down deep in them. So if the cone is closed, that means the seeds have not developed yet. As the seeds develop and the cone opens, and sometimes it will open with moisture, the cones will actually fall out and then the life cycle continues. But there are male and female cones of our ferns and mosses, I agree, are not parasitic. They actually just they don't really cause any harm because that would be a parasite. Liam, a fern cross section under the microscope, very cool. You can actually see sometimes that gametophyte generation. They will quite often make slides of that microscopic stage of the fern and the different things. Looking at your comments again as you're going through things. So that brings us to our last phylum. So again, we're kind of discussing the classification of the plants. The last phylum again is the phylum Anthophyta, which are our flowering plants. Next chapter, module 15, you guys will get into depth into the flowering plants, where you're going to deal with the monocotyledons and the dicotyledons, monocots and dicots, and kind of spend the entire chapter looking at the flowering plant phylum. So again, monocots, as we discussed earlier, have parallel leaves, fibrous root systems. They have a single cotyledon that forms from a seed, producing flower petals in groups of 3. So it could be 3 or 6. Dicots have our netted leaves. They have a taproot. They have petal groups that comes in 4s or 5s. They have 2 cotyledons or leaves that come from this seed. Okay, so at this point, we've kind of summarized the things of the chapter. We still have some time left. So what I would like you guys to do is get out your sheet of paper and let's see if we can start going through the study guide questions. So I'm going to mute you for just a moment. Please get out your stuff that we can do study guides together for the next while, and it will save you guys some time come Monday. So I'm going to mute you guys for about a minute. All right, so if you guys want to, I'll put this back on me again. So let's go ahead and go through some of the study guide stuff. And whatever we get through will make your day on Monday that much easier. So again, things that you guys need to remember are the things that we've discussed today, looking specifically through all of the different things with leaf mosaics, shapes, margins, venations, the different classifications, the functions of the root stems, leaves, the differences between monocots and dicots, both in the stems, the roots, the flowering parts, etc. So let's start with number 2 on the study guide. So if a portion of the plant is producing new cells, what type of plant tissue will be in that region. Okay, so there are 4 different types of tissue. So the type of tissue where there's new plants and producing new cells, that is called the meristematic. Those are undifferentiated tissue, which means they can develop into anything. Do you guys remember when we looked at the root tip when we were learning about mitosis? And I said, all right, here in the root tip, that's where you kind of see all of the phases of mitosis. Well, the reason for that is it's undergoing a lot of development and growth in that meristematic tissue. So again, the answer to number 2 is what portion of plant is producing new cells? What type of plant tissue will be in that region? It is the meristematic tissue. All right, the next question, number 3. What do we call the structure that attaches the blade of the leaf to the stem? This should hopefully be review. We kind of talked about that. What is basically the structure that attaches the blade of the leaf to the stem? I'm going to wait for you guys to answer this for me. The petiole, yes. All right, so the petiole, thank you, Lydia. The petiole is the correct answer for this. Bummer, Maggie, the snowman. All right, so petiole, thank you, Andrew. I'm seeing that. You guys popping in with some answers, fabulous. All right, looking at number 4, identify the leaf mosaics in the picture below. Hopefully you guys, with our discussion just a moment ago. So we have 3 different choices. We have whorled, alternate, and opposite. So letter A would be whorled. Letter B, because it's like opposite, would be, or alternate would be here, versus opposite is directly across from one another. Give you guys kind of a moment if you want to kind of record some answers. All right, number 5. Number 5 will take us a little bit of time, and we need to, for each problem, we need to list 3 things. We need to do the shape, the margin, and the venation for each of those leaves. So for A, we're going to have 3 things listed. For B, we're going to have 3 things listed, C, D, E, F, etc. So for letter A, let's discuss that first. All right, so letter A, let's look at the shape first. The shape of that is, it's got a kind of a flat bottom. So which one do you guys feel like just kind of flipping back? And you're going to reference back to the shapes. I will tell you this, that flat bottom that you guys see on letter A, that helps you to determine what the shape is. That's actually deltoid. It's not elliptical, even though it is longer than wide, but because it has a flat bottom and it's more triangular shape, it is actually considered deltoid. Again, some of these are hard to determine what shape they are, but it's that flat bottom there that gives you the deltoid shape. All right, so the margin of that. The margin is going to be, again, flipping back to the margin that you guys see on page 434. It looks smooth as I'm looking at it. Doesn't look like it is a serrated edge, doesn't look dentate, doesn't look crenate or undulate. It has an entire edge for the margin. So it has a smooth or entire margin. So the third thing we need to list for letter A then is the venation. Okay, so the venation for letter A would be parallel because all of those ribs or all of those veins kind of go in line with one another. So that would be parallel venation. All right, looking then at letter B. I want you to see if you guys can do letter B on your own, and then we'll check your answers. So if you have your sheet of paper out, see if you can do letter B on your own. You don't have to type out the answers onto the live chat, but do it on your own, and then let's kind of check and see how you did, or how you did in comparison to what the answer key says. Now that said, on your test, I am a little bit lenient. The question is, what if we say it was elliptical or oval? Knowing now what you guys do, that the deltoid, you're looking at the flat bottom, I would expect you to answer it as deltoid. Hopefully we're learning. Okay, so again, I want you guys to see if you can do letter B on your own, and then we'll go through the answers. For part A, we actually said it was deltoid is the shape, but we're now on like part B. So again, you need to list the shape, the margin, and the venation for it. All right, let's go ahead and go through the answers for letter B. The shape would be either elliptical, but you could make an argument for oval. The margin would be serrate, or you could make the argument for dentate. I'd probably accept either of those answers. And the venation is going to be pinnate because it's got one main rib and then it comes into the main rib. Okay, just like here, it's got one main rib and then it comes into it. We're looking at your oak. It's got one main rib and the things come into it. So again, elliptical or oval, I would accept, serrate or dentate, and then pinnate. The answer key gives you elliptical, serrate, and pinnate. All right, let's go to letter C. All right, we need, again, the shape, the margin, and the venation for each of those, or for letter C. So flipping back. I agree, some people are putting in lobed. It is lobed, very good. All right, so what about the margin then on it? Does it look smooth? Does it look toothed? Does it look undulated? So we're talking just about the outside edges, not the fact that it's lobed or it's cleft, but what is the actual outside edges? The question was asked, do we need to have this memorized for the test? Yes, we do. The margin for letter C is entire. It is actually a smooth margin, even though it is lobed. Okay, so it has a smooth margin. So it's entire. Now, what about the venation for the third one? And that is an oak, just in case you weren't sure. That's an oak. But the venation for that, Is it going to be pinnate, palmate, or parallel? Pinnate is the correct, those of you guys who are putting that in, pinnate is the correct. So for letter C, it is lobed, it's an entire, and it's pinnate. All right, let's do letter D together. Again, we need to have shape, margin, and venation. All right, so letter D, the outside of it. I will tell you this, the answer key says that this is lobed. I would accept either lobed or cleft, but because it's not as deeply indented, like if I show you in my leaves here, the more deeply indented, this is going to be more of a cleft, versus if it's just more rounded coming in like this one is, then it's going to be considered a lobe. So the answer that the textbook gives would be lobed, or excuse me, would be cleft. But I would accept either answer for that. Then we need to go from the shape to the margin. So the margin for letter D, the margin they say is dentate. Again, I could be argued one to look at other things as well. And then the last thing would be the venation on that. Okay, the venation on that, I would call that more pinnate. All right, moving on to letter E. Now, letter E is definitely different with its venation, so I'm going to kind of tell you, because it's very hard to see what the venation is on that one, looking at it. So the shape of it for letter E, it's orbicular. Okay, I'm seeing some things coming back for question on, not sure which ones you guys have questions on. Looking back at palmate versus pinnate, are you guys referring to letter D or letter E? Okay, letter D. Letter D, the answer key says it is palmate, but I could be argued that it's pinnate because to me, it has got some ribs that, or it's got some veins that come off of it. When I, in my botany experience, like coming back, looking at this is very distinguishably pinnate, very definitely one main rib and ribs coming off of it. Versus the palmate, which actually come down, and it actually comes more to like your palm coming down to one particular point, like this leaf right here. I don't know if you guys can see this, where it comes down to one point, more as a palmate versus pinnate. Now that said, I would take either answer, which maybe is not good because your textbook and I are differing a little bit on this, but your textbook for letter D gives palmate. I could be argued palmate or pinnate, just from my experience of botany, that on some it's very easy to tell, and some it is harder to tell. Can you guys see the difference? Okay. were on letter E, so let's go through the answers for letter E, which is orbicular because it is round. It has an undulate, which means it's got big outside margin grooves, nice and smooth. And for the venation for this particular one, it is, according to the answer key, it is pinnate. Now, it is very hard to see because it kind of groups together as an orbicular shape, but it is pinnate for letter E. That's why it is more difficult, especially as you're looking at diagrams versus real pictures of real leaves, to determine whether it's parallel, it's pinnate, it's palmate. It is more difficult. Last one that we can go through is letter F. Okay, letter F for the shape of it. Now, what does it look like? I'm going to wait for an answer to come through live chat. So we're looking at letter F, so you guys can have an opportunity to interact with me a little bit. More fun for me. Chordate, awesome. I'm seeing some answers, fabulous. That one is pretty obviously, it's a heart shaped, so that's chordate. Okay, what about the margin for letter F? Take a look at the outside of it. What's the margin? Entire, good job. Seeing that consensus across a number of people. So it's an entire. And what about the venation? This one is obvious. This is not a, this is an obvious one. So what is the venation for letter F? Just like the venation in this one. All right, and pinnate, very good. So again, some of them, it's hard to tell what they are. Some of them are pretty obvious. So I have some flexibility on some answers and a little bit less on others if it's pretty obvious, in my opinion. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can get through a couple more questions before our time is done. So number 6. In a leaf, what is the function of the following tissues? All right, so we have 6 different things that we can go through. I think we'll have a chance to get through all of these as we go through them. So first one is the palisade mesophyll and the spongy mesophyll. All right, hopefully you guys are remembering. I'm going to kind of bring up my picture. All right, so if you guys remember this, we talked about the spongy and so it's the cross section of the leaf where you would see the palisade layer and the spongy layer. And the types of cells that we have there have lots of chloroplasts. So the lots of chloroplasts help us in determining what the function is. So the function is, oops, sorry that it's backwards. So the function of both the palisade mesophyll and the spongy mesophyll, the main function of that is photosynthesis. So the darker the color, the more photosynthesis, or the more concentrated the chloroplasts are, and the more photosynthesis that actually occur there. All right, the function of the epidermis. So again, the epidermis. Okay, maybe I have this up there right for you guys. So the epidermis, there's an epidermis layer on the top and the bottom. Okay, the function of the epidermis, kind of like the function of our skin, it is for some protection. Okay, for protection. It's the outside layer. Sorry that it's still mirrored. All right, xylem and the phloem. We're just going to go on. I won't bring my backwards picture up again then. So xylem and phloem. Hopefully you guys are remembering. So xylem, again, it's the non-living, but it transports water is its main thing, and minerals up from the roots up to the leaves, etc. Goes up against the gravity. So the xylem does for water and minerals. The phloem actually flows down and it transports the food and the organic substances. So that glucose that it makes in the plant, we talked about photosynthesis and how it makes glucose. That is going to be flowing through the phloem. The food flows through the phloem. And the last thing, which is the collenchyme, that is support for it. So A and B are both photosynthesis, yes. So looking at both palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll, that is both photosynthesis. So I'm looking at my comments. We'll get through one more question then. So what controls the opening and closing of the stoma on the leaf? Again, the stoma is just the opening itself. What controls it? The guard cells. So those guard cells, let me kind of show you guys again my picture, if I can find it quickly. This will probably be backwards too. But again, those guard cells are the darker colored ones, and the stoma is just the opening. So we kind of looked at those earlier as well. All right, so we've gotten through a number of the questions. So you guys still have some work to do, but at least getting through a number of them, hopefully that will make your day a little bit easier on Monday. Our class time is officially over, so I won't keep you guys longer because I know some of you probably want to go get lunch, etc. So next week we will probably be doing a either Zoom or Google Hangouts. So you check your email. You'll probably have to download that app, but that way you guys can hopefully find some flowers and share them with the rest of us. So that we have an opportunity to look at more flowers and you guys will kind of have an opportunity. So check your email. We'll kind of talk a little bit more and have a great weekend, you guys. Stay safe, stay home, and we'll talk again next week. Keep that homework coming in to me. I will get those things done. So do we have a lab? There is no lab write-up for today's, anything that we did today. Next week, we will look at flowers. Potentially, we'll do a lab write-up. We'll see. I'll let you guys know for sure. No lab write-up for this week. So even though it says on Monday that you're supposed to do a lab write-up, I would guess. I don't remember for sure, but typically we were supposed to do a lab today. So no lab write-up on Monday. So just cross that off your calendar. And next week, bring some flowers to our class time together. And it'll be a little bit more interactive because we're going to do our format either through a Zoom class or through a Google Hangouts class. So anyway, I'm going to sign off for my live things. You guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy your weekend. Bye, guys.